All right, guys. So as we kind of wait for everybody to start filling in here and joining in for the nutrition talk, for anybody that is watching this that's not part of the gym, that has no idea what's going on, we are in the middle of a nutrition challenge for CrossFit 760, and one of the big pieces on this is trying to get everybody to understand the importance of nutrition on their overall health and fitness, and really starting to get them to understand how to make lifestyle changes so this becomes something that is part of their life and not just another challenge. So last week or 2 weeks ago, we started off, and kind of the big message was to keep a food log and to really start to track everything that you're doing so you can start to build and have an understanding of where you want to go. And with that log, it'll kind of give you a base and you can start to make changes from there. Now, this week, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the diets that are really big and getting a bunch of publicity at the moment, not just in the CrossFit space, but just in the health and fitness industry as a whole. So with that, one of the big important things to talk about and to really understand is that it doesn't matter whether we're looking at the Paleo diet or the zone diet or counting macros, or if we're on the keto plan or we're intermittent fasting. Like, the big thing to understand is we just need to keep things simple for ourselves. And it doesn't matter what it is that we're going to do. If we can stay consistent with whatever it is that we decide, meaning that all of our meals throughout the day are roughly the same throughout the week, throughout the month, we're holding true to whatever it is that we've said we were going to do. And then we need to be dedicated to it. That's something that no matter what's going on, like if we're on the paleo plan, like that's what we're doing, and we're not going to jump ship when the next big trend comes out, even though all of our friends are doing that. And then the discipline piece. If we can stay disciplined and figure out how to say no when we go out to dinner with our friends, or we're at an event or a party or some sort of a celebration, figuring out how to make whatever it is that you're doing more important than having your friends like you and being okay saying no and having them give you a hard time, and knowing that that discipline is what's going to get you the results that you're after. So we'll kick off and we'll talk about the paleo diet. It's one of those things that for the last several years is got a lot of buzz, and it's maybe not as popular at the moment, but it's still there, and it's still something that's heavily talked about. And really what the paleo approach is essentially an elimination diet, where they're saying that we are only going to eat foods that our ancestors ate from the Paleolithic times. Basically eliminating grains, dairy, and legume from our diet. And typically in the ones that are really strict, they're going to pull all the supplements out. And there's some great benefits to it, especially for people that are on the far end of the spectrum, following the traditional American diet that's heavy in carbohydrates and grains and legumes and all that kind of stuff. And it's a good way to break them of that and get them to understand that they can get enough calories in. And they'll start to see some great results. And there's a lot of people that continuously come back to that paleo plan. Some of the downsides is it's real easy to get caught up in the, well, I'm going to have a paleo cupcake, or I'm going to have a paleo this, and I'm going to have a paleo that. And we have to remember, like, if we're going to do the paleo diet, then we should only be eating foods that were readily available hundreds of thousands of years ago. So big thing on the paleo diet, understand what it is, and if you're going to do it, awesome, and just start to understand what the pros and cons are, and if it works for you, if it's going to be something that is valuable to where you are trying to go, try it out and then stick with it. Again, take the food log and write it all down, and that way you can come back and start to make adjustments as needed. And then we'll start to talk about it. One of the ones that has a ton of buzz about it, and that's kind of the counting your macros and essentially having numbers where you're going to eat X amount of protein, X amount of carbohydrates, and X amount of fat throughout the day. And again, this is something that works really well, and it's no different really than what the zone diet is that's been around the CrossFit world for a long time. And the big thing there is that we don't really care whether you're going to do macros or zone, and why we like both of them is because it's starting to hold people accountable, and it's starting to get them to weigh and measure and start to put that number to what it is that they're doing, and we have that measurable piece in there. Now, some of the things with the macro plan works really well for a lot of people, and some people are really disciplined and dedicated to it. And then you get the other people that are like, well, I'm going to save all of my carbs for night, and then they end up eating a gallon of ice cream, and as long as it hits their macros, they're okay with it. Now, while yes, you may be hitting your numbers as far as the overall health and wellness of yourself, like that's not really something that's sustainable for the rest of your life. So what we want to do is start to understand how to take the macro plan and how to make it something that is actually going to improve our health and not just hit our numbers. And, there's some people out there that might be hitting their numbers and having the ice cream or cookies or whatever it is at night, and their body composition's improving, and it'll work for an extended period of time, but at some point it's going to start to fall off, and you're going to start to fade into either that piece where it becomes, oh, well, I just missed my numbers a little bit, and you're starting to overeat, or it's just something that becomes non-existent anymore, where you're like, oh, well, I'm getting the results and I'm still eating what I want, so I'm just going to go back to it. And people tend to fall off that way. So one of the reasons that I specifically like the zone diet is because of its simplicity, and it really truly teaches balance throughout each meal and not just hitting numbers at the end of the day. It's really showing people how to balance their protein, carbs, and fat each and every meal. And what that's going to do is it's going to start to balance your energy levels throughout the day. The whole premise when Dr. Barry Sears put the zone diet together was to essentially put all of your hormones in check and have that hormonal balance throughout the day, which is one of the big things for our overall health and wellness. So big thing on the macros and zone, really they're both great as far as getting people to weigh and measure and start to really put some measurability into their intake through the day. Either way, whatever you're doing, just make sure that it works for you and you're doing it in a way that's responsible and pushing you towards the overall health and not just about hitting your numbers. Another big one that's going around right now, intermittent fasting. And this has taken off in the last year or two. And one of the reasons is people are getting really, really good results, not just body composition wise, but just overall health. And essentially what intermittent fasting is giving yourself a window to eat and a window to fast. So typically people are fasting anywhere from 12 to 16 hours, and we're going to have a 12 to 8 hour window to eat depending on how you go about it. And what it's going to do is, it's going to limit the amount of time that you're able to eat. So overall, it's going to limit the amount of calories that you'll take in. But one of the bigger things that it's doing is it's promoting overall health. Our digestive tract and system is now having a break like it's supposed to. It shouldn't be eating all day long. If we're typically eating every 4 hours, and at night we're only sleeping 6, and we eat right before we go to sleep and we eat right when we wake up, there's not a long break there, and our body is now being overworked. Some of the other stuff with intermittent fasting, outside of weight loss and some of the little body composition stuff, is the added effects and benefits for real chronic disease. So people are seeing huge results in fighting off Alzheimer's and cancer and other chronic diseases. And there's a ton of stuff out there and a ton of different people talking in all different aspects of this. I recommend that if you plan on intermittent fasting and you want to try it out, that you do your research and you do it the way that it's supposed to be done. And you really start to log and track not just what you're eating, but your energy levels throughout the day. A lot of people will go really, really strong on this, and they'll start to push that fasting window farther and farther. And now all of a sudden their energy levels are dropping and they like it because their body composition's better, they're losing weight, they're doing this, they're doing that, but their overall health and maybe performance and energy levels throughout the day aren't where they should be. So something super important to start tracking on that. The keto diet, something that probably in the last year has really gained a ton of popularity, and for a good reason. Again, there's a ton of benefits to it. Essentially, we with the keto diet are going to teach our body to use fat as fuel, and essentially the ketones is what we are teaching our body to burn, and a ketone is just basically a byproduct of our body turning fat into energy. As we go through that process, our body will start off pushing into ketosis, and it's doing so by having a limited supply of glucose or sugar. Basically, people are limiting the amount of carbohydrates that they have and kind of pushing their body into this new state. A lot of times, people that are crash dieting will end up here without even realizing what's going on, and they end up in some places where their energy levels aren't where they should be, and they're not there for long enough for their body to truly start to adapt to it. So what we want to do with the keto diet is stay with it and stay consistent and truly give our body time to adapt and make that change, where it's predominantly going to be using fat as energy versus glucose or carbohydrates. And again, with this, the benefits are kind of all over the place, from typical weight loss, body composition stuff, sustained energy throughout the day. And then some of the other more interesting things is it's really starting to be seen that as we go into ketosis, our body stops craving sugar, and we kind of suppress our appetite through that. Carbohydrates are known to spike our appetite, and if we are essentially limiting or excluding them completely, now all of a sudden we can limit our hunger. And if we're limiting our hunger, now all of a sudden we have the ability to put ourselves in position to where we're only eating what we need versus what we want. So some cool stuff there. Again, the health benefits as far as fighting off cancer and Alzheimer's. Again, there's some cool results and some studies there. Some really good stuff about people going into ketosis and essentially beating diabetes with this, and type 2 diabetes, and getting off of insulin and getting off all the medications that they've been on. So big piece as we talk about all of these new, or not necessarily new diets, but all of the stuff that's in the press and that everybody's kind of ranting and raving about, is to take the time and educate yourself. And whether that is coming and talking to a coach, like, hey, coach, all my friends are intermittent fasting, they're having great results, I really want to try it. How can I do it, and how can I do it in a way that works for me? Same with the Paleo Diet Zone, and your coach or mentor or whoever that you're talking to should be able to set you up for success. If you don't have access to a coach or a mentor, read, study. The internet's amazing. You can get any information that you want with a click of a button, order books, whatever you need to do so you actually are putting yourself in a position to be successful with this instead of just turning this into another fad diet for yourself. So on that, again, the big kind of piece for today is the simplicity side of it. Do something that's going to work and be simple for your lifestyle. If you're on the road all day long and travel a ton and you're like, I'm going to weigh and measure all my food, and you know that you're about going to have business meetings at this restaurant and that restaurant, probably not going to be the most successful plan for you right off the bat. Not to say that it's not going to be a place that you can go at some point, but maybe not where you need to be right now. So set yourself up for success. Do something that you can be consistent with. Stay dedicated and be disciplined in those times when all your friends and family members are trying to get you to go the opposite direction. The results will be well worth it. All right, so if you guys have questions, go ahead and start throwing them out. Post them into the comment sections, and I will start answering them as we go. And if nobody has any questions, I might just tell embarrassing stories about Steven from Elk City. No questions, huh? We were so busy last time, and everybody's silence this time. All right. Well, if we have no questions, I just got a question on my Instagram. Fat Matt, what do you think about the keto with really high fat content? So Fat Matt's asking about upping your fat on the keto diet, and yeah, that's essentially what's going to happen. Is we need to have our fat high enough to limit the amount of carbohydrate intake that we need, and keep our caloric intake high enough to sustain the amount of energy that we're after. So typically going from anywhere from 20 to 30% protein, and then about 5% carbohydrates, and you're going to get the rest of your calories every day from fat. So again, if you followed along last week, if you start logging everything down, as you log it and you start to kind of journal everything on how you feel, if you start to notice that your energy's lagging or you're feeling full and lethargic, then you can start to tweak the numbers from there. And then Matt just kind of asked a follow-up question. Just make sure that anytime that we're eating fat, that we're getting good, clean fats, coconut oil, avocado, any of our like olive oil, avocado oil, stuff like that. If you're going to do nuts, I would recommend you do them in small amounts to keep your omega-6s and omega-3s balanced. Silence from everybody tonight. No questions. All right, well, I'll give everybody about another 60 seconds or so, and if there's no more questions, then we'll call it a night, and you guys can go get your food prep done and get ready for tomorrow. And hopefully everybody's been keeping their food logs, and I've actually had a couple really good food logs come in, and I've seen some people really starting to kind of dive into this the last couple weeks. And one of the other cool things that I've seen from several people in the gyms is they're like, oh, I started writing everything down, and right away I noticed how bad I was eating when I thought I was eating well. So just by people writing things down, it starts to put in perspective on how much better and how much different they could be versus what they actually are doing. Question from Caleb. Hydration tips in terms of replacing after massive sweating. So hydration is one of those things where if you're dehydrated, it came from 24 hours before typically. So we want to be hydrating consistently if you know that you're going to be and a big long workout. It's hot, it's humid where you live. Keep your hydration consistent from day to day. As far as replacing fluids, in a situation where you're working out for over 60 minutes, make sure that you are replacing water as you go. It doesn't need to be a lot, but maybe just sipping throughout. A lot of times if I'm off somewhere, long workouts, it's hot, it's humid, I'll throw electrolyte packs, stuff that has no sugars in it, essentially just added salts to keep myself in check. And then after my workout's done, the refuel process is kind of all part of it, making sure that I'm getting what I need to be ready for the next day. Caleb, hopefully that answered your question. One of the big things, if you do find yourself kind of in that place where you're like, I'm way more depleted than I want to be, coconut water is a good option versus trying to do Powerade or Gatorade or all that stuff that's full of sugar. If you're doing coconut water, try to make sure that it's from natural sources and not something from concentrate with a bunch of added stuff to it. So just kind of following along the same rules as we always talk about. Oh, here we go. I found all the Facebook questions. Steven Trevino, what's the optimal amount of sleep? Everybody's going to say something different here. Most people, 8 hours is best, but some people will do well with 7. Some people need 9. I would log this thing. There's a ton of research that you can do as far as when you're waking up and making sure you're not being woken up out of a deep sleep. Some of the stuff that I do with the sleep is using a wake up light. So the light slowly illuminates throughout the last 30 minutes before it goes off. So it wakes you up slowly instead of having the alarm wake you up out of a deep sleep. Hopefully that helps, Steven. If you have more questions, let me know. Kyle, oatmeal. I know you're talking no carbs, but just curious. Oatmeal, some people do really well on it, some people not so well. It's one of those things that people feel like they need, and it kind of depends on what their overall goals are. I would encourage you to cut it out for 30 days and then add it back in and see how you feel. Again, just kind of following along with the same process that we do with everything else. Log it all down. Take it out, put it back in, take it out again, and see if you notice the difference. If you have specific questions about oatmeal, let me know. Steven Trevino, what's the best thing right after a workout? Parlette Provisions protein, of course, Steven. No, just ideally we want to get protein and carbs immediately post-workout, and everybody says there's a 30 to 60 minute window or a 15 to 30 minute window, and there's a ton of different stuff going out there. Ideally, if you can get something in your system as close to the end of your workout as possible, it'll help replenish you and help your recovery get kick-started for the next day. A lot of people make the mistake of adding fat to their post-workout, and fat is essentially going to slow digestion down. And what we want to do immediately post-workout is get those nutrients into our system as quickly as possible. Josh Patterson, can you drink too many Fit Aids and kill cliffs? So I'll give you my personal opinion on this. I am not a fan of anything carbonated, number one. And it's one of those things where, like, do you really need it or do you want it? Is it actually doing something for you or does it just taste good? Those would be the questions to really ask yourself. Some people will say yes, some people will say no, and yes, there's a ton of micronutrients in there, but basically a bunch of vitamins and stuff that are going to go into your system quickly. But I would play around with that and drink Killer Cliffs every day after your workout for a week, and write it all down, write down how you feel, and then take them out of your diet for a week and see if you notice a difference. And you got to be honest with yourself, and your wallet might like you a little bit more after you go through that test. Steven, are you just having everybody hang out with you and you're just asking questions for them? Should we eat to perform or eat to hit macros or blocks? So this is going to be person to person dependent. And I've been on both sides of this. When I was fighting consistently, my performance was what mattered 100%. So everything that I put in my body had to do with making sure that I was going to make weight and make sure that I was going to perform to the best of my ability. The general population should be eating to hit what they need to feel their best and to get to wherever their goals are. If their goal is weight loss and they have their macros or blocks set up for that, then be eating to hit that. Some workouts you might start to feel like you hit a wall a little bit. You might feel like you're losing strength, so on and so on. Or your energy might be down. All is okay. Stick to it for however long you set out, and then make that adjustment as needed based on that. If you're a high-level athlete, talking like the 1%, and you have your numbers laid out, and you hit a couple workouts that were a little bit longer, a little bit harder than normal, and you have an event coming up, and you have some training that has to get done, I would say to bump your calories up or your macros or your blocks, however you're going off of it, to make sure that you feel good and ready to train to be at peak performance. I got a question on my Instagram from Jay Riley. Did you talk about fasting yet? Should we eat before workout? When do you fast? How often? Jay, if you go back to the beginning on the Facebook and rewatch, we talked about intermittent fasting a bit. Real quick, should we eat before workout? That's going to vary from person to person. I prefer to not eat before I do long conditioning type stuff early in the morning. If I'm going to lift heavy, do something at a real high intensity, a lot of high power output stuff, I prefer to have some sort of food in my system. And the fasting thing, the best case scenario is you're going to fast for 16 hours and give yourself an 8-hour eating window. And then you can just kind of skew it from one end or the other on that. Some people go a little bit less time, like 12 and 12. Just kind of depends on what they need for them. Go back and check out the beginning of this. Does intermittent fasting raise your testosterone levels? That would have to be tested. There's definitely some studies out there that will say yes. I would say it's going to be much more a combination of just improving your overall health. And typically when people go in to do, I'm going to start intermittent fasting, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, it also coincides with, and I'm going to start lifting weights, or I'm going to start exercising and training and this and that. So just kind of, again, if you're super interested in that, get your levels tested while you're fasting, get them tested while you're not fasting, and see if there's a difference for you. What's the truth behind eating after a certain time? Josh, not really sure what you mean by that question. My guess would be like not eating within an hour of going to sleep. Again, it's person to person dependent. Some people will do just fine eating right before they go to sleep. If I have an athlete that's trying to gain weight and put muscle on, I'm going to tell them to eat right before they go to sleep. If I have an athlete that's trying to lose weight, I'll typically tell them to try to not eat within an hour of going to sleep. So just kind of, again, will depend from person to person and case by case on that. If you have specific questions on that, Josh, let us know. Cody Crow, fasting versus insulin spikes. Not really sure exactly what you're getting at here. As you fast, obviously your insulin levels are going to be low, and your overall blood glucose will be low. If you come off of a 16-hour fast and eat a whole bunch of carbs and nothing else, you're going to have a big insulin spike. There's not really sure where you're going with that, Cody. Josh asking about casein protein, for example. So Josh, that's something that, again, like I have athletes that are trying to gain weight, and I typically will give them like a whey casein blend of protein powder to drink before they go to sleep. The casein will help it digest a little bit slower. It just kind of depends on what your goals are there. Fat Matt's asking about sparkling water. Is that good throughout the day? My wife's probably laughing at this question because I give her a hard time about it. It's just something that I don't do. I don't feel it's necessary. But if it's sparkling water or soda, you're definitely better off with sparkling water. Just be aware of how it's making you feel. If it starts feeling like you're bloated all the time, if you start to notice ill effects, probably not so good. Typically, the carbonation is not going to be a big deal unless you're drinking several carbonated drinks each and every day. And when I'm saying several, like up over 6 of them, something like that. I mean, I don't know an exact number, but for the most part, as long as you do it responsibly, you'll be okay with it. And typically, it's going to be a much better option for people to drink some sparkling water than to grab something full of sugar. Jamie Trotter, during competitions, what's the best thing to eat between events? Jamie, I wish I had a perfect answer for you. And I know I keep coming back to the food log thing, but that's really it. Is like everybody's so different, and nutrition is one of those things where it's really person to person, and there's no like set, this is what works for everybody all the time. Best thing to do if you have a competition coming up and you have 3 events and you know that roughly they're going to be 2 hours apart, I would do a practice day where you do those 3 events roughly working out at the same time and play around with what you eat in between. A good rule here is if you're eating, or if your workouts are close together, or your events are close together, I would recommend protein and carbs and no fat to keep your food being digested quickly. If it's a really quick turnaround, maybe just a quick boost of carbohydrates. A lot of endurance athletes will do just like a goo pack or a shot block, something just to boost their carbohydrates in between to keep their energy up high. We just had this conversation the other day a bit with our coaches, and basically like we want to be training and functioning on the everyday on fat, and then on game day is where we would essentially give ourselves a little bit of boost with that added glucose and up the carbohydrates. What's your take on pre-workout? Josh, you're like the supplement man. It's something that I don't encourage people to take. It's something that I don't really feel is necessary for most people most of the time, especially doing high-intensity workouts. As you start to introduce caffeine and essentially any of the uppers that typically come in the pre-workout stuff, you run a risk of spiking your heart rate really, really high really quickly, and it's not able to come back down. And then at the same time, I've seen people that will throw their pre-workouts down and be just fine doing the short, intense workouts. So be aware of what's in your supplements. Be aware of what it is that you're taking and why. Like, why are you taking it? Is it really doing anything for you? Put it all in your log. Journal it all out and see what the actual outcome is. All right, any last questions, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Kyle says that pre-workout gives him a headache. Kyle, it's probably all the people that are taking it also that just won't stop talking after all their caffeine. For anybody that's kind of joined this thing late, the video will be up on the CrossFit 760 page, and I believe it'll be on my Instagram for the next 24 hours or so. If you guys have anything else that comes up, anything specific, you guys are free to send me messages. If you're members of the gym, ask any of your coaches. Everybody will help out. If that's it and nobody has any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign this thing off. Thanks, guys, and I will see everybody in 2 weeks.